All right, so what we're going to talk about in 1-3 is absolute value equations and inequalities. Today we're just going to look at the equations. Okay. So just a few things to cover here. So most of the time, absolute value is going to give you two solutions. So you want to be thinking about that when you're solving these. And the reason why is because of this property. So if absolute value of x equals k, then x could be either positive or negative k. So whatever's inside could be positive or negative and still give you a positive answer. The only time that you would have just one answer is if the absolute value equals 0, because there's not a positive, negative 0. There's just 0. It is possible for them to give you no solution, and that's if absolute value equals a negative, because absolute value is always what? Positive. And why is that? Like, what's the definition of absolute value? Yeah, the distance from 0. So when you're talking about distance, distance is always positive. Okay, so if I'm solving this, absolute value of x equals 7, well, then that means that x could be positive or negative 7 and still give me 7 when I do absolute value. So, because absolute value of 7, that equals 7. Absolute value of negative 7 also gives you 7. So that's why there's two possibilities for what x could be. All right, let's look at the second one here. Okay. So you cannot add 3 until you get rid of the absolute value. So this is incorrect. It is incorrect to do this. That is not right. And if you were to plug your answers back in, you would see that that is incorrect. So what you have to do is get rid of the absolute value bars first. To get rid of your absolute value, you make your two equations. So whatever's inside can equal 4, or whatever's inside could equal negative 4. So your plus or minus is here with the 4. So x minus 3 equals 4, or x minus 3 equals negative 4. So I have x equals 7, or x equals, add 3, that would be negative 1. So those are my two answers. It's not always just plus or minus some number. It's the plus or minus is up here with the 4. Also, so I just mentioned it, but again, absolute value has to equal a positive number. No matter what, absolute value of something is always positive. So if this had been a negative 4, I couldn't solve. Right? I would have no solution. So let's look at this on a graph. So the reason why it's written as y1, y2 is because it's typing it into the graphing calculator. So I'm going to type it in. If you have a graphing calculator, you can feel free to follow along. You're not going to be tested over it or anything right now. Like, we're not going to graph even in this chapter. So, but this just kind of gives you an idea of why we have those two answers. So let's just say I'm going to graph this part. So absolute value of x minus 3. So I go to y equals, and I want to type in absolute value of x minus 3. Absolute value is under math and then over to number. And it's this first one, this ABS. So absolute value, x is next to alpha, x minus 3. Okay, when you first graph something on the graphing calculator, you want to make sure your window is set and make sure nothing else is in your y equals. All of these plots are turned off. You can turn them on or off by um, highlighting them and then hitting enter. Okay, so all of those are off. So for a standard window, you can hit zoom and then 6. That's a standard 10 by 10 graph. Okay, so this is what the shape of absolute value looks like. It's a V. So I want to know, okay, where does this absolute value of x minus 3, where does this equal 4? I want to know where that equals 4. So I can type y equals 4 in to the, another y equals, and graph that. And I see that it intersects the V at 2 places. Those are my 2 solutions. So here at -1 and here at 4. So that is why you're going to get 2 solutions, except right here at the vertex, you would only have 1. Or down here, like if this had said absolute value of x minus 3 equals -2, okay, well, what is that? So I want to know, where does it, the -2 intersect? Well, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. So this one would have no solution. And we know that because absolute value cannot equal a negative number. That does not make sense, what we have here. Any questions about that? Okay. So let's practice. Okay, absolute value also are not parentheses. They do not work the same as parentheses. So the distributive property does not apply to absolute value. It is incorrect to do this. You cannot distribute inside absolute value. So how can I get rid of that 3? Divide by 3. So you won't make your 2 equations until you divide by 3. You need the absolute value by itself before you can make your 2 equations. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Now you have 2 equations. So I'm going to have x minus 5 equals 3, or x minus 5 equals -3. So x equals 8, or x equals 2. Let's make sure we did that right. So 3, I'm going to check x equals 8. So typing this in your calculator, if you know where the absolute value button is, you can type it all in at once. If you don't, that's fine. We'll just work it out. So go ahead and subtract. What is the absolute value of 3? And then 3 times 3 is 9. Okay, so that's good there. I checked 8. Let's check x equals 2. 2 minus 5 is -3. What is the absolute value of -3? +3, good. And 3 times 3, that is 9. Okay. So I checked that those are correct. All right. need to get absolute value. So solve by isolating the absolute value. I need to get that by itself first. So what should I do first? Add 6. So add 6 to both sides. Then what should I do? Divide by -2. And I get absolute value of x minus 1 equals -5. Now, this is going to be no solution because this is negative. But let's say we forget, and we don't notice that, and we set up two equations. All right, so x minus 1 equals -5, or x minus 1 equals +5. So x equals -4, or x equals 6. So let's say that's where we are. And I go and I check this, because that's what we should do. We should check. And I go back to the original. So I'll start with checking x equals -4. And it's -2, -4 minus 1, -6 equals 4. Nice. Okay, so I have -2, that's -5. Okay. We'll come back to this, but I need to. Absolute value of -5 is +5, okay? And then I do calculate this, that's -16. Does -16 equal 4? No. So this is not right. Okay, x equals 6. Same thing. -2, 6 minus 1, minus 6 equals 4. What's the absolute value of +5? +5. Again, I'm getting -16, which does not equal 4. So I know this is no solution because neither one of my answers worked when I checked them. So what I'm showing you is that if you don't catch it right away, that because it's equal to a negative, that it's going to be no solution. If you're checking all of your answers, you will find it there. You will find it there as well. So you can either write no solution or x equals the empty set. Either one, you don't have to write both. So if we go to find our mistake, which was here, right here, I could have said no solution. If I can spell, I could say no solution. Because absolute value cannot equal a negative number. I didn't know that until I get absolute value by itself. So if this had been a -4 from the start, that doesn't automatically mean it's going to be no solution. Not until you have the absolute value by itself. Okay? Questions about that? Okay, that's where we're going to stop. We will do absolute value inequalities tomorrow.